What's going on, guys? So today we're working on the Xterra once again. In the last video you saw me remove the front diff, so if you haven't checked that out, make sure you do before you watch this one, because this one will be all about how to remove the oil pan. And before we can start removing anything, we'll have to drain the oil. So I find it's best if you have warm oil. It tends to flow a lot better than cold oil, so if you can, start the vehicle up, warm it up, and then go through the process of draining the oil. Once that's done, we can get started removing all the bits that you need to get the oil pan out. Alright, so crawling under the Xterra here. First things first, on the passenger side, you'll see these transmission lines, and there's a few brackets with some 10mm bolts through that we'll have to remove so we can loosen up this transmission line and get it out of the way. Now, hopefully you can get a good look at this too. And the next major thing we'll have to remove is the starter, because it is in front of or in the way of a couple of bolts holding the pan to the bottom of the engine. And that is done by removing these two 14mm bolts on the bell housing here. There's one right there, and you can see that shiny bolt up there. That's the second one. And once again, I have been soaking these bolts for a little bit just to make my life a little bit easier. Now, behind this starter, there is going to be a bit of a metal bracket. Hopefully I can show you this. It's a bit tight in here, as usual, it's working on Xterras. So behind the starter, you can kind of see that metal bit there. A little bit better there. There's a bolt head, so that bracket will also have to be removed once the starter is removed. And scooting over to the other side here, the driver's side, there is another bracket. So this is what that bracket looks like. That is behind the starter. So you'll have some 14mm bolts here on the bell housing, as well as two up here. So once we get those few bits out of the way, there are a number of 10mm bolts holding the pan on, and there's a specific sequence in which you need to remove these and put them back on. And I'll show you that once we get some of these parts off and we get to that point. Alright, so now that we've got the transmission hard lines loosened up, we can move on to getting the starter out of the way. And first things first, just disconnect the negative battery terminal, just because we are working on something that has an electrical charge. Alright, so I had to use a spark plug wrench like this with a flex head and a bent handle to get that upper starter bolt out. But it broke free pretty easily because it's absolutely covered in oil. And now the starter is loose, so we can go ahead and wiggle that free. I almost forgot, we'll have to disconnect this little clip. It just kind of reroutes back to the starter, and it's just kind of around the engine mount here, so we'll just loosen that so we can pull this clean out of the way. Alright, so it was a little bit tricky to get the starter back out to this point. There's actually a little dust shield on the engine mount that was sticking out a little bit too far, not letting me push this back, so I actually just bent it a little bit, and that gave me enough room to get it down to here. So just loosen the nut to the connector, and the starter is free. So now we can see right into where the starter engages the flywheel and the bracket that we have to remove in order to get to the pan bolts that are just behind it. It's a little bit tight in here, but these are 14 mils. I'll remove this one and then I'll show you the process on the driver's side because it's a little bit easier to see. So this bracket does have a bit of a hidden fastener right here, just above the hump of the oil pan. Let's see if I can get in there and show you. Just right in there. Oh. Right down in there. So if you're wondering why this isn't coming out, that's the fastener right there that you need to remove. This is another look at that bracket here. One thing to note is that these bolts here that are on the top side, on the engine side, are a little bit shorter than the ones that bolt into the bell housing. So you want to make sure these ones stay with this piece and remember where they go when you go back to install it. Okay, so now that we've got all that stuff out of the way, we've got a good look at all the pan bolts. As you can see, there's one way back there that was covered up by that bracket, and let's see them all along here. Alright, so now that everything's out of the way, we can begin to start removing the oil pan bolts. Now, Nissan has a specific order in which they want you to remove the bolts. It's basically starting from the back to the front in a crisscross pattern and then side to side. So I'll just throw up a quick little image of it showing you how Nissan wants you to remove it. But yeah, once you get that figured out, once you've got a reference of how to remove the bolts, you can go ahead and start doing that. And like I said earlier, they're just 10 mils, so shouldn't be too hard to get them out. Alright, so we got all the bolts off, and probably saw in the video I got excited and kind of forgot the steps to taking the bolts off. Just kind of got carried away removing them. So just make sure you have 18 of these before moving on, and these little brackets will come off as well. These were just holding on the hard lines that we unbolted earlier. Now my pan is still stuck on here pretty good. Yeah, I think I have a bit of a leak in the front and something in the back. Now you don't want to go jamming something hard in here, something that will damage the sealing surface, and especially if you're going to try to reuse the pan, you definitely don't want to pry on this lip right here. You want to use a specialized tool for this, or something that you can kind of gently work in there and remove a bit of that seal. Now this is just a plastic paint scraper, so shouldn't damage anything, and you really only need to just kind of break it, just pop that seal in one spot, and the rest should follow. So I've got that kind of jammed in there, and I can kind of feel it losing a bit of suction, so I'll just keep working my way around, and eventually, oh, as you can see there, it's ready to come out. So I'll just set this camera down and try to bring this down with two hands. Alright, hopefully you can see this. I guess this little plate will come free. There's a bit of plastic there. You might want to actually put down some cardboard if you care about your driveway, because you probably will get a few drips here, so I'm just going to go grab one real quick. An old pizza box will do. Oh, there we go. So this will take a little bit of wiggling around those hard lines. That is if you didn't remove them. Okay, so it seems like we've run into a little bit of a snag here, and we don't actually have quite enough room to drop this pan. So I guess upon further research, from what I've read, this front crossmember does have to come out. So it's kind of silly why it would be tacked on here, if the only way to remove the oil pan is to in fact remove this crossmember. But on the plus side, with this bracket out, I can re-bolt it to the front diff and raise this all up in one shot and not have to fight it. So I guess that's a plus, but the only downside is now we'll have to remove these 4 bolts like I had mentioned in the previous video, as well as cut these sort of tack welds, which didn't really want to do, but I guess at the end of the day that's what I got to do. The oil pan is just chilling here and it's kind of stuck, so yeah, we'll move on to I guess getting the grinder out and cutting these tack welds. think I found the leak, which is good news. I 100%, well, I'd say 95% sure it's not a rear main. This seal here, this was actually stuck to the engine, but they're so brittle. Yeah, I don't know if you could hear that, but that's not sealing anymore. This actual RTV or whatever is still in decent shape. No leaks actually around that. Here's the other seal back here. You can see. Yeah, so that was not sealing anything. That's supposed to be pliable rubber, so that's the leak. Not a rear main seal, thankfully. So the next step is to clean up the mating surfaces. If you're gonna get a new pan, you don't have to worry about this, but if you're gonna reuse this, clean this up. Absolutely 100% check that it's not bent at all. And then throw your new seals on and slap it back on the Xterra, and then you should be good to go. Alright, so now that we've got the mating surface all cleaned up and we have it a spritz with some brake cleaner just to remove any oil residue, we can go ahead and open our sealing package with our 2 rubber seals. One of them goes right here and the other one goes at the back there. So those will be installed first with a little dab of RTV sealant, and then we will quickly, shortly after that, prep our pan with sealant and press that into place, and then we will install all the bolts, let it dry for a little bit, and tighten to spec. Okay guys, so here's a look at the sealing set for the Xterra's oil pan. This is just a Felpro kit. You can get a whole bunch of different ones, but that's the number there. These are the 2 seals, and you can see they're pliable, unlike the ones that I pulled out. And for sealing gasket maker, I'll be using Permatex Ultra Gray. Now this kit does include 2 small RTV silicone packs, but make sure to check yours first before trying to install this, because this one's actually hardened right up. But I like to use this stuff. This is what I've used on my Subaru, so the directions for this are slightly different, as this one requires you to wait an hour before torquing to spec, whereas this wants you to torque to spec within 15 minutes, I believe. And here's a look at the oil pan. This is a Xterra unit, part number right there. And of course I picked this one up from Rock Auto. It was super cheap, and it looks like a quality unit. One thing with these stamped pans, before you go and install it, is just double check that the mating flange is in fact flat, with no major dings or anything like that. Make sure to clean out any sort of debris that may have gotten in there during shipping. But other than that, give the mating surface a quick wipe down, and then apply your silicone and move over to your vehicle and press this into place. Okay, so I've cleaned up the mating surface on the front of the engine here, and I've applied a little bit of RTV to the sealing surfaces of the gasket. Now this does only go in one way. There's a little nub here and there's a little nub here, so just orient that in the correct direction and press it into place. Alright, so our seal's in place, and we'll kind of move quickly here. We'll move on to the back and get that one in, and quickly get the pan gooped up. Now adding sealant to the pan is pretty straightforward. This pan's got nice little grooves here that you want to fill up. And you basically want to go in this groove and behind the hole, in the groove behind the hole, with a moderately sized, I guess pea-sized bead all the way around. You don't want too much of this stuff because you don't want it to goop out into the engine. So there is a specific order in which you want to tighten these bolts, but I'm just getting some in here just so I can hold it up. Now once I get all these bolts in, I'll just snug them down finger tight because the ultra gray needs to set up for an hour, and then you can give it a final torque. Alright, so once your sealant of choice has set up and you've followed the recommended drying times before adding fluids, you can go ahead and reinstall the starter. Don't forget that plate that sits in between the oil pan and the transmission, and fill it up with oil and start it and give it a test before we put back the front diff, just in the off chance that the seal somehow got messed up when you put it in. But once you've confirmed that, the process is basically just a reverse, and you're good to go. So hopefully you'll have no more leaks after this for a long time. So I did run into a little bit of a problem. So these are the little brackets that secure the hard transmission lines to the pan, and the new gasket was so thick that I couldn't actually get the bolt in here without fully tightening the pan, so I've fully torqued it down. I'm just gonna let the RTV Ultra Gray set up for, I guess I'm gonna wait for 24 hours for it to be fully cured and sticky, and then just remove the 4 bolts that secure these to the pan and get those back in there so we don't have rattling hard lines. Okay, so I filled this thing with oil and ran it for about an hour, let it sit overnight, and it's looking pretty dry, so I think that is a successful replacement of the oil pan seals. And no drips on the cardboard here, so I think we are good to go on this one. So the only thing left to do is put all this stuff back in, which shouldn't be too bad. But yeah, all in all, not too bad of a job. A couple little tricky bits. It was kind of a surprise that you did have to grind out that center cross member, but nothing too major, I think. So yeah, anyways, you know, if you watch this video and it helped you out, let me know. But that's it for today. Thanks for watching.